All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Dave here, talking real music in real time for a few real people out there just like you and just like me. All right, before we get going here, Turkish Delight, really amazing album. And that's what the inside looks like. 15 spectacular songs from some of today's best melodic rock artists. Just amazing singers, amazing guitar players, amazing musicians. If I were a radio programmer and I wanted to kind of sneak something in to the boring format, this is what I would drop in there. It's legitimate rock, people. It won't make your ears bleed. These are guys that know how to play instruments, and the production value is really good, really high. And all I could say is check this out. If you have a chance to, Turkish Delight, courtesy of my friends over at Escape Music. All right. Again, if I were a programmer, things would be very different out there in the music world. People always send me messages. You should program a radio station. Well, I would have to take over a major corporation probably to do that. Like a terrestrial radio station today, the ownership, it's just a few companies that pretty much own everything, and they all do the same thing. And we're in a music holding pattern, people, if you haven't noticed. What's weird is soon it'll be 2023, right? And we're playing music in some cases that's like 55 years old on the radio as part of a format. Say like you hear something from 1968, which is very plausible, right? Especially on these adult contemporary stations where they just kind of willy-nilly, yeah, we'll play this whiny 90s singer next to this bubblegum band from, we'll play like Sugar Sugar by the Archies, right? And people go, yeah, it's all, no, it's not all the same. It just isn't. And it's because people have kind of lost their minds. They don't have creativity the way they used to. But at least in their eyes or ears, they're getting some variety. It's like, yeah, those songs have nothing in common, and the audiences and demographics are totally different, but we're just going to throw it all in there. And as much as I like the whole Bob FM concept, like, hey, we play everything. Actually, you don't. You really don't play everything. You play everything that you think you should play. And everything is focus tested, meticulously so, down to a science, where if you run a radio station like that, you're still playing it safe. You just are doing like all of these genres that are different, and you're smashing them together thinking that people love this mixtape concept or this random play concept. Hey, I've got an MP3 player and I've got Lady Gaga and The Who on here. All right, here you go. We play everything. Most people are going to either not like both or not like one and like the other. And when that happens, they're going to go, okay, I don't like this radio station. I do that all day long. I'm like, hey, they were doing great until that whiny chick came on from the 90s who's depressing me about my life and about her life and her relationships. So I'm just like, yeah, you know what? No. No, I'd rather find a purebred station that played music from the 60s through like the 80s or 70s. 60s and 70s, I think, go together well. 70s and 80s kind of go together okay. 80s and 90s can go together to some degree. But once you start going, hey, it's 1968 through 1990 something, no, I'm sorry. And I know I'm open-minded and I like a lot of music, but it doesn't work for me. And what's even more depressing is, like, the other day, I was critiquing a very popular YouTuber, and he did this top 20 one-hit wonders of the 80s. I think he did one for the 70s and maybe even the 90s. And I'm not going to critique him on the 90s. I might go check out the 70s. I do not have any desire to critique any one-hit wonders from the 90s. And that's just me. I've got issues and I have to deal with them. and I do on a daily basis. Just want to let people know this. So I'm listening to this this list, or I'm reading it, or he's going through the list, and I kind of called him out like on John Waite, Missing You, and I forgot the song Change. Okay, I just want to make it clear. I had it. I was going to talk about change, and I forgot to. I had notes, and I tend to just go off and do this whole stream of consciousness thing, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. But the point being is that it's a cultural thing. It's a cultural issue. A video killed the radio star. That's a cultural song. It's not necessarily a radio song, but people will put that in there, and you hear the same songs, the Safety Dance. And what about Pop Goes the World? We didn't hear that. We don't hear that anymore. Well, there's a reason you don't hear that anymore. It's people deciding what you should hear and what you shouldn't hear. And then, well, people don't remember that song, Dave. Okay, well, here's something that's pretty interesting. Don't Stop Believin', which is the most downloaded song in history, did not chart higher than Who's Crying Now, did not chart higher than Open Arms, and quite honestly, was about as strong as Stone in Love was on rock stations. All right. But if you're just purely going to look at the Billboard, top 40, Don't Stop Believin' wasn't as strong a song as those other two aforementioned Journey songs. What I'm trying to say here is that the cultural shift, or the fact that this song was in The Sopranos and it was in Glee or whatever else it's been used in, and for other reasons just unknown, maybe the message in the song, it's become just a cultural iconic form of art. I don't know how you want to describe it, but it's kind of transcended just its song status. It's bigger than that. It's its own thing. You could do that with a lot of other music that's out there. Some of it people have never heard before, but look what happened with Kate Bush running up that hill. Just bizarre to me. It's bizarre. It's like my son, 18 years old. Hey, Dad, ever hear of Kate Bush? Yeah. Why? What's going on with Kate Bush? Yeah. Her song is like the greatest song in the world, Dad. Really? Because I used to play that song when I was at college radio, and we played it a lot, but it wasn't a top 40 hit. It might have been on the Billboard 100 at some point. But it became a cultural thing because of Stranger Things, right? So I think humanity in general is ready. We're ready for something a little bit better, because we're in this holding pattern. It's soon it'll be 2023, and we're playing songs from 50 years ago, in some cases longer, music from the 60s. If it's 1963, that would be 60 years ago. All right. I don't hear too much from the early 60s, but I hear quite a bit, from the British invasion, which is, I guess, maybe 64 going forward. So it's close. So you've got all of this music, and you're just plucking little samples from everything. And as time goes on, you're just losing more and more of what we used to listen to and what we used to hear. And yeah, a lot of it has to do with format. If it was on a rock station, like the 70s freeform rock stations, you won't hear any of what they were playing anywhere. It's how Chicago became so popular, because you could play a 7-minute cut. You could play all the different movements on Chicago 3 or Chicago, whatever, those first 3 Chicago albums. You could get away with that. Nowadays, it's like, nope, can't get away with anything. We focus test meticulously. That's why you're about to hear Hot Blooded by Foreigner again. And I'm like, okay, well, that's a good song. It's a really good song. But man, oh man, can we maybe hear a different song by Foreigner, And yeah, they have a pretty good group of songs that have survived, but there's another huge group of songs, including solo music by Lou Gramm, that you don't hear too much on the radio anymore. Every so often, somebody messes up in the control room or something. There is no control room, though. This is all funneled in, piped in, mailed in, transmitted, much like votes are transmitted into modems. This is this is how the music industry transmits their, information, and everybody gets the same info. You can go to different cities and you can go on the internet, listen to different stations that are online, and lo and behold, it's almost the same exact playlist. All right. So what do you do to beat the music holding pattern? Well, Dave, you create your playlist. You've got your Spotify playlist, right? Oh yeah, I got it. I've created them and then I've deleted them. But that's not the solution to the get in the car, unless you're really, you got your phone, you're going to Bluetooth your playlist. And I know a lot of people do this stuff. I do it. And then I stop the car and I got to redo everything and reboot everything in order for that to come back. Whereas in the old days, the radio would just be on. And when you get back in the car, it'll be on the same station and they'll be playing another song. So I don't know. The holding pattern that we're in is, for a lot of people, just it's sad because it's everything that's going wrong with culture around us. There's no progress. It's very regressive to be in a music holding pattern when there's all this amazing music out there. And I'm not talking about Bob FM on steroids. I'm talking about you've got your usual format of classic rock or top 40 songs from the past or whatever you want to call it, 80s music. And then you kind of throw a curveball once an hour. Maybe you put in something new every so often. Not the whole time, because apparently people can only take this stuff in small doses, or they hit the station and they go back to the most reliable music you've ever heard, the stuff that you've heard over and over again, and it never quits. Look, there are some people that will send me messages and say, hey, I know you keep talking up this new album by, Turkish Delight, whatever that is, right? But I don't need it. I got the music I listen to. I don't care if there's some guy on this that sounds like he should be in the band Kansas. I don't care about the guy who, sounds like he could be in Bad Company. And okay, that's fine. So what do? I don't know what you do. I say you have plenty of radio stations that already do what those folks who don't care about this want to listen to. How about you create a few radio stations for folks that might want to continue down that road, where, trying to keep this whole melodic rock thing going, which I'm trying to do. That's why I promote this stuff. And I'm finding I'm kind of a voice in the wilderness. I'm like Dave the Baptist, I'm just trying to say, hey, man, have you heard Cats in Space? Really good. And they go, Cats in Space? Yeah, Queen, Cheap Trick, ELO. You don't like those kind of bands? Because I like them. So anyway, what's the solution? Right now, there is no solution because, if you're a big corporation, you're going to play it safe. And it's all about, will this make us money? Like in the old days, the record labels would have artists for 2 or 3 albums, and if they didn't go anywhere, they might drop them or they might continue. Journey probably wouldn't be here today if the record label booted them after those first 3 albums. They just said, okay, we're going to continue on with Journey. And how many bands were under the radar who put out several albums and they didn't do all that well? Eventually they did get dropped, but those albums are still out there and nobody knows what they are. Nobody's heard them before. There are countless bands from the 70s, from the 80s, and it's like archiving all of this material and then having somebody come along like a prospector and start digging and go, hey, look what I found over here. How come this wasn't a huge hit? And look at this. The West Coast people do this for a living. That's why, you know, Japan, they have all these Japanese imports because they find all these albums and sometimes they just transfer directly to CD. They don't do any remastering or anything, but it's the only place you can find it. So people will pay $30 for something that was on vinyl in 1977 that was a complete flop or just wasn't promoted enough. But people who want to hear that style of music with that particular recording capacity or technology back then, people are digging that stuff. People are finding stuff that they had never heard before. And I think some of that stuff should be on the radio. The reason we have this whole yacht rock phenomenon right now is because there's so much of that music that went under the radar when the decades kind of flipped from the 70s to the 80s. And people who are creating that kind of music, you know, they weren't sure, maybe they'll be back in style soon. And turned out that the 80s were for real, and, you know, the sounds changed and the looks changed. But then you've got bands like State Cows, who I promoted the other day, really amazing Steely Dan, Toto kind of stuff. And that is a whole industry to itself right now. If you created a yacht rock station, terrestrial station, and you were serious about it, I think that thing would be a huge success. It would do so well, depending on the market. But like here in Florida, the lifestyle and the weather and all that. I mean, and obviously people have yachts here, you know, so you could actually love it. You can actually listen to this radio station on our boat. This is just amazing. So there are all kinds of ideas. People would have to, you know, convince somebody high up on the food chain, hey, let me try this and see if it works, you know. Or somebody with deep pockets would have to come along and, you know, maybe buy a couple of radio stations and say, hey, we're going to do this for the love of music. And if we make a few bucks doing it, awesome. And try it and see if it works. I think anything with variety these days and strays from this business model of playing it super duper safe all the time when it comes to music would be a breath of fresh air. I mean, there's a station to the north of where I live, and they play some very old music, and some of it I'm not that familiar with, but I'm just happy to hear something that I'm not familiar with on the radio, whether it's got like a big band thing or a swing style going. I mean, I got into this swing stuff a few weeks ago where I was finding records at thrift stores, and I'm like, wow, where did all this music go? And are some of these people still around who used to listen to this music? And even if they're not, somebody should play this stuff, some of it, maybe not all of it, but you could mix it in maybe a real old school adult contemporary format where you're playing music from like the 60s, 70s, and maybe a couple tunes from the 80s, and throw some of this stuff in there and see, because all of it was charting on Billboard back in those days. So in any event, going off on all kinds of tangents here, I just like to hear stuff that's different on the radio. If you did a rockabilly station, I would be interested in it. If you did a smooth jazz format, like, and they still have a few, but the smooth jazz thing was huge, especially like in the 90s. I think that was like the antithesis of the grunge music. So people are like, all right, let's go over to this station. It's kind of nice, kind of relaxing. It's mellowing me out. It's what I need. And I think with all this political turmoil in our country and all the polarization, rather than pounding your head against the wall, I think that format would be a welcome change and would probably help people maybe lower their blood pressure, maybe get them to think about, you know, important stuff in their life rather than worrying about what the lyrics are to songs, because most of it is instrumental. So you can just kind of bop your head along, you know, and say, okay, or no bopping at all, just hanging out and enjoying the music. So I know this is kind of a weird video, but I wanted to kind of follow up on the One Hit Wonder video and talk a little bit about what's really going on, which is this music holding pattern for radio stations and how weird it is, and how, music is going to be 60, 70 years old. And people are going to be like, yeah, man, that's what we listen to. It's all that they play. And, there's new music coming along, but it's because all of this new music comes along and goes under the radar, then it comes and then it goes and then it's forgotten about, and it's never incorporated in this long stream of music that was on the radio from, the 1950s up until when people started to say, hey, I don't know if I want to listen to this radio anymore. I don't really like this music that they're playing. And I like the music I used to listen to. And there's still music that would have supplemented that older music, and it's being made all over the place. Like I said, this and this and this, 3 examples, and there are countless others that I've talked about this year. So in any event, folks, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Some weird stuff has been happening with the number of views and all that stuff. So if you could watch the videos, subscribe to the channel. You could join Patreon for $1 or $2 a month, whatever you want to do there. Also, if you watch this video over on Odyssey, there are memberships over there that you can sign up for. I think it's pretty cool. And it supports the channel directly, and it helps me. And right now, as we are going into the holiday season, I'm hoping that the algorithm is friendly to me. That's what I can hope and pray for. But again, thanks for watching, and I will see you soon.